Okay, we understand what is cybersecurity now. So what constitutes cybersecurity? When do we call something is cyber secure, or when do we call it is not secure? So we want to ensure there are three properties that needs to be held before we could call something as cybersecurity. First one is availability. The second one is integrity. The third one is about confidentiality. So what does each one of these actually means, right? Confidentiality, let's start with that, the base. It is when you send a message from person A to person B, nobody in between can understand that message. Then we call the message is confidential. For example, you may want to log in to your banking application using your user ID password. And ideally, between you and the bank, nobody else should be able to understand what is that password. Otherwise, anybody can impersonate you and log in as you. Bank will not be able to differentiate between you and another person when your password is leaked. So that is why maintaining confidentiality is important. So what kind of things can happen to maintain confidentiality? So the basic thing we all know is about encryption. So whenever you typed your icsabank.com or hdfcbank.com, what you would see is a small lock icon in your browser. When you click on that, you can see saying this is the certificate of icsabank.com, or this is the certificate issued to hdfcbank.com. So your browser knows that it is actually communicating to a genuine bank server and not some dubious website, right? So they can exchange data safely between your browser and the bank server using encryption. Encryption is a technique that is used to maintain confidentiality. To very high level understanding of what is encryption. Encryption is all about converting your plain text to a cipher text. So if you want to send a message to your friend saying let's meet at 5 p.m., if I send it as is over the network, you can imagine that somebody in between can edit 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. Then what would happen is your friend probably would turn up at the restaurant at 8 p.m. rather than at 5 p.m. So this is what we call as man in the middle. So somebody in between the sender and receiver actually understood the message and altered it as well, right? So what happened because of that is there the data got leaked. So you can think, do I use or do I send information in my daily life where I use encryption? Yes. Any website where you are interacting, for example, Gmail, your user ID password is encrypted. Or if you are using an iPhone and you are sending the data between your phone and iCloud is encrypted. All your photos, all your data that you're storing in iCloud is encrypted, right? So this is what we use in our daily life as well. Cybersecurity is now in our daily lives because we are all living in a connected world. So as much as it applies to your office, like your confidential data, like you how much sales you made, or what is your price items you are buying at, or what is your vendor account information, client information, all this is the confidential information that you might have in your office, in your personal life, your credit card numbers, your identity details like Aadhaar or PAN card or driving licenses, and all your user IDs, passwords, all this needs to be exchanged confidentially so that nobody in between will be able to understand and get the or fetch the details. Now comes the second pillar, that is about integrity. So when do we call something is integral? If between a sender and receiver, if someone modifies the data and receiver would come to know about it. For example, the same example that we took in previous case, if we say that the message we are sending from a sender to receiver is let's meet at 5 p.m. and if someone edits that to make it 6 p.m., let's meet at 6 p.m., Then as a receiver, do I know that whether this message actually came from the known sender or someone altered in between? If I could do that, then I call it integrity. So where do you see it in your daily lives? Any software that you are trying to download onto your machine from web, how do you know that while it is being downloaded, someone in between not altered the message, right? You want to ensure it is safe. Or the email that you want to send to somebody, you want to ensure the data is safe and nobody can be able to modify it in between. So these are the real life scenarios or in business scenarios where you want integrity to be maintained, right? Just imagine what would happen if there is no integrity. You making an online banking transaction, you said that, hey, let's transfer $100 from person A to person B. And when the bank actually made $100 transfer from your person A account to person B account, but then you go back and say, hey, you know what? I actually asked for $10 transfer, but what happened was $100 transfer. I don't want to take accountability for it. So that is the criticality. You want to ensure that there is no unauthorized modification that is possible when the transaction is happening. That is when we call it integrity. The topmost, very important, is availability. So what is availability? Data being available for genuine user, for genuine business purpose, then we call it available, right? So what happens, for example, uh, your Gmail server. So every time you log in, it will ask you for a user ID password. And every time you enter a user ID password, Gmail server have to validate whether that ID and that password is correct. That combination is right, or is there an issue with the combination, isn't it? So now imagine there are like 10 lakh people or 10 lakh machines or bots that trying to attack a Gmail server by sending wrong ID, wrong password. They don't know any ID, any password. So anonymously, they are sending this data and randomly they have selected some user ID, some password, and every time they are sending a different ID, different password and hitting the Gmail server. Now what would happen? The server, for every input it is receiving, it should respond whether it is the right ID password, right? Now, when a genuine user is actually trying to use the same service with the correct ID and password, since the server was so busy responding to a hacker, it will not be able to respond at the same speed or will not be able to respond at all to the user for the genuine user. Then we call the availability is an issue because the service is not available to a genuine user who is expected to have this service access. So repeating, so the three pillars: confidentiality, integrity, availability. As long as these three principles are held, we call it cybersecurity.